Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to each of you. Good morning, all. Good morning, everyone. Finding our way hopping on this morning for our Ayurvedic inspiration. And then, as always, some time of meditation, and then we will have our time of yoga sadhana together. Good morning to each of you. So this morning, as we look at Ayurvedic inspirations, we take from the last time we spoke together on Wednesday, which we discussed the 3 causes of disease and the way also in which Ayurveda recognizes what health is. And so we were looking at the 3 causes of disease and really in an applicability, examining the ways in which we can sort of track those throughout our lives. So remembering that first one, truly pragyaparada, is this moving against our naturalness of wisdom, moving against, what we already know is good for us in many ways. And then, of course, the misuse of the senses, so that we're simply not moving through our senses, or what are often called the jnanendriyas. So these 5 sense organs, we're ingesting crap. Let's be honest. We're just not ingesting well. And so if we don't choose well what we're ingesting, really not just through our mouths, but through all 5 senses, then we notice that in this way, our body is really made up of what's entering and the impressions that are entering. So that was the second cause of disease. And then the third, parinama, was time. And so we were talking about all the ways by staying in correspondence with time. So whether it's daily routine or seasonal routine, or even the sort of rhythms of our lives, like really recognizing the stages of our lives, that if we come into more correspondence with the movements, the natural movements of time, that this too will help us to maintain our healthfulness. And of course, recognizing the ultimate gift of time, which is that, and timelessness on some level, that each one of us absolutely will leave this bodily and mental form in this life. And if we really have a recognition of that, then it allows us to savor the timelessness of each day, actually. To really come into preciousness, to not wait for things in our lives, or to not take things for granted or be entitled around things, when we really feel the sort of potency of this moment, of this time. Welcome, seeing many of you joining and saying hi. So as we discussed that already gives us really a platform of empowerment to recognize, if we can recognize those causes of disease, then to really recognize what medicine is in many ways, right? So to recognize the ways in which, if we stay in alignment with those things, then we can stay in alignment with our natural birthright of healthfulness, of full and complete, resplendent healthfulness. And today I would like to discuss the way in which Ayurveda sees the 3, what we call Chikitsas. So the 3 forms of medicine, or Chikitsa treatment, also can be translated as treatment or as medicine. And these are quite, sometimes when we first get in touch with Ayurveda, we think we need to know everything about the doshas, or maybe about saptadhatu, about the 7 tissues, anatomy, physiology. It can be overwhelming for some of us who may not have that background. But actually, as we start to break things down in the way that we have been, you might see that this is really a wisdom that all of us holds within our own beings, because it is made of us. We're made of Ayurveda. We're made of the Vedas. We're really, in many ways, we're made of this intrinsic wisdom. It was just encapsulated and given a map, we could say. But it's been given various maps that are called different things throughout the world. So according to Ayurveda, the 3 forms of Chikitsa, the 3 forms of medicine, and I've been mentioning them in different ways. Like last night, I was mentioning them also in the Q&A. And I often will reference to that whenever I'm in the Q&A, because I'm answering how we might treat something, how we might look towards the medicines of Ayurveda for something that someone may be dealing with in their lives. So if you want to see the applicability of these, come every Thursday night to the Rasa Ayurveda Q&A. So the 3 of these are Ahara Chikitsa, Vihara Chikitsa, and Oshadi Chikitsa. And what does that mean? So Ahara is food or diet. Vihara is lifestyle. And Oshadi is medicine, or rather we could say herbs, or what we might even call it, 5 sense therapy. That's what I often call this one, Oshadi Chikitsa 5 sense therapy. So we have diet or food, lifestyle, and then 5 sense therapy. So anytime we're noticing an imbalance, anytime we're noticing a vitiation, something that's less than in alignment with our healthfulness, we start to be able to track where it might be arising from at a root issue. And so, as I've been discussing yesterday also on the Q&A, so often from our Western concept of allopathy, we attempt to treat symptoms. So we look at treating symptoms, and in Ayurveda, we're really not treating symptoms, but rather we're getting to the root of any issue. And so there could be various symptomologies, like a whole pocket of things that could be occurring. And when we start to take stock of all of them, we can see that they all funnel back to one root, and that root is elemental. So in Ayurveda, we always look at what is the element that's responsible for all of these symptoms coming up to play out, whether that's through the mind or through the body or through the energy, whether it's through various places in the body, like maybe it's in the digestive system and the eliminatory tract, maybe it's happening through the skin, maybe it's happening through one of the orifices. So we can notice the way in which these symptoms have a pattern often. And that pattern is usually of one dosha or another. So the 3 doshas, to remind you, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, they hold the elements. So it may be an issue of Vata, which is more air and ether. It may be an issue of Pitta, which is more fire, a little bit of water, but fire especially. Or it may be a root issue of Kapha, where there's an increase, for example, an imbalance in earth and water. And if we can start to be more intimate and understand the expression of those elements, to see the expressions of those elements when they start to get sort of heightened in our system, then we can also start to give these medicines to the root. So what I mean by that is, I was giving the example yesterday. For example, someone starts to see fire expressing itself symptomatically in various ways. So we start having fire in the skin. Maybe there's like eczema or psoriasis, or one starts to notice that they have some acne or generally rosacea. There's just a lot of heat that's expressing itself through the skin. Maybe we also notice that the eyes are less than white. The sclera starts to get a little bit yellowed and or even red. This is again expressive. We notice that the digestive system, maybe there's acid reflux. Of course, all of these don't have to be present, but I'm giving you examples. Acid reflux maybe is there, or for example, diarrhea, loose stools. Maybe there's heat, or there's bleeding, or fissures, hemorrhoids that start to happen, but especially with bleeding that may be occurring there. Maybe we also notice that there's a fiery quality to the mind. So someone's feeling impatient or intolerant. Someone's feeling a little bit maybe aggressive, or just generally there's more irritation, anger that might be popping up through the mind. So there could be a whole host of symptoms. And when we start to look at all of those, there's a common thread. And the common thread is this heat, is this fire that's throughout all of them. And so we can say, okay, Pitta seems to be imbalanced in the structure. There seems to be an excess Pitta, a heightened fire element. And if there's heightened fire, I'm not just going to go and treat acne and then go and treat the eyes and then go and treat acid reflux, give some Tums here, use some eye drops here, use some kind of steroid cream on the skin. And then, we have fire in the mind also, which is leading to various things, and maybe I'll give something that's like an anti this or an anti that, anti-anxiety, anti-depression, whatever might be happening in through the mind in its final expression. Let me give something to cloud that and suppress it. So a lot of times in contemporary medicine, what happens is that we use things to suppress all of these symptoms, and we're just treating the symptoms, so we're never getting to the root of things. And so Ayurveda really, really believes in digging out the root once and for all, really getting to the root of all of it. And it's actually very efficient, because if we get to the root, then the expression of all of those symptoms starts to soften out, actually, we find. So in that way, what we would actually do is start to treat the root of that heightened Pitta. So we could start to give things that will cool out Pitta in general in the system. So now you can already start thinking, because if you know Ahara, Vihara, Oshadi, if you know diet, as well as lifestyle, as well as five sense therapy, start to think of all the medicine you could give to decrease fire, to calm and cool and relax fire. It helps us also to understand the qualities of these elements. So maybe I can go through those, or the qualities of the doshas. So Vata dosha, it is air and ether, and the qualities of that is that it's light, it's mobile, it's more subtle, it's kind of irregular, so it oscillates on some level. It also is more dry. So whenever we start to see all those qualities, light, mobility, for example, if the mind is moving all over the place, if we're scatterbrained, that's Vata. It's movement. If the digestion is moving all over the place, so sometimes, we're digesting okay. Other times things are just like kind of sitting there with a lot of bloating or gas. If we notice sometimes that our appetite is really, full and alive, and other times our appetite is like nothing, right? So that's that oscillating quality or that mobile quality, but especially lightness, coldness, dryness, and this irregularity. Those are all qualities of Vata. So if we start to see those heightened or increased, we want to give what we might call the opposite. So we want to be saying, okay, what can I do as far as food and lifestyle, and also through the five senses, that would pacify those things and thus pacify Vata dosha. And so what you can do is you can do things that are more heavy, that bring heaviness rather than lightness, that bring stability rather than mobility, right? That brings softness and smoothness and moisture rather than dryness and roughness, and that bring consistency rather than irregularity. So you see, actually what we call these in the tradition, and it's beautiful, is the Guruvari gunas. There are 20 pairs, or rather 10 pairs and 20 qualities. And when one is showing up, we provide the opposite as medicine. Actually, this was not just in Ayurveda, but actually Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras used to speak very clearly to this. And he would say, if one quality is showing up that's creating obstacles or that's creating challenges in the system, then present the opposite. Bring the opposite. And if you bring the opposite, you're going to notice that actually that can be medicine for what's occurring. So in the same way, we can do that through our diet, through our lifestyle, and also through the five senses. So what can you do through diet for example, Vata dosha? Well, you could eat things that are more heavy. So things, for example, that have a good quality of oil. Things also like root vegetables, things like grains are wonderfully sort of heavied. One pot meals that have more of a completeness to them. So it could be in the quality of the food itself. It could also be in the quality of how you eat. So you eat with consistency. You eat a good sized portion rather than sort of picking at the food. So start to see that it's both in the what, but also the how. Then think about the lifestyle. How can you have a lifestyle that's less mobile, that's more stable, that brings more consistency, that's a little bit more warm? All of you are like, move elsewhere. I see a lot of Canadians on the call. So that might be an option. So you might be moving somewhere else. Yes, that's possible. That you move elsewhere that's warmer, but also just making sure that you bring warmth to the system. So the environment you live in, or covering up also with warm clothes, doing things regularly. So keeping consistency in your lifestyle, right? Making sure that there is also a warmth in the way in which you're connecting with other beings. That too can also allow for the softening of Vata. And making sure that we're not too scattered or mobile in the things that we're doing. So, I'm going to do this now, and now I'm going to do that, either in our career or our pastimes, instead sticking to something. So you see, even that can be medicine for Vata. And then what about in through the five senses? So we often just say that it's herbal medicine, but actually anything that's received through the five senses can be considered oshadi, can be considered actually almost like this medicine or five sense therapy. So what are we looking at, listening to, smelling, tasting, and being touched by that could pacify Vata? So we want to have, again, things that are more soothing. We want to have things that are more relaxing and calming and grounding. We want to think about grounding. So rather than mobile and scattered, so think about the quality of music that you're listening to. What if you're listening to music that might come from, more of an African inspiration that's more earthbound? It has drumming, or maybe it has instruments like didgeridoo, something like that, that really connects down to the base of the earth. It has some kind of base to it. rather than listening to things that really lead to scatteredness or mobility. What about watching? So it could be both in what we're seeing, what we're watching, if we're watching constantly things that are really active, versus how, or let's say also considering how many different things we watch. So if throughout the day we're watching a bit of this and then we're flipping to that and we're all the time on social media and we're scrolling, what does that do? Again, it's mobile, it's light, it's kind of rough on the system, and it's cold, it's never connective. So you see, even through the eyes, we've talked about the mouth, what we would eat, and then even with touch. So a beautiful medicine for touch, for vata, to pacify vata, is to use oil on the body, to use oil on the skin, to use oil in the nose, to use oil in the ears. Actually, the more oil we can put on the body, the better, because for vata, this really helps to bring a grounding. It brings a stability, it brings a warmth, and it also brings that sort of soothing, moist rather than dry quality. So you see, we've gone through each one of the medicines as it might apply to vata dosha. And then we start to bring harmony to the root of where the various symptoms may be arising. And then we start to notice that the vata symptoms might be softening out. So what are some vata symptoms? If vata is imbalanced, we might be noticing dry skin. We might be noticing that we're having bloating or gas or constipation. We might notice also that we start having dryness in through the orifices. So we have dryness in through the eyes. We have dryness through the ears. I already said the skin. We can even start to have dryness in through the sinuses. We might also notice with vata that we start having mobility in through the mind, as I said before, so scatterbrained. Or, for example, the memory is not so full and calm and centered. Or we might start also noticing with vata that we have anxiety, worry, like the mind goes everywhere. It's always anxious, looking for something to hold on to. And if we start to pacify, as I was just discussing, we might start to notice that all of these various imbalances in different ways start to find a softening out. So this is just the example from vata dosha. Now what about pitta? As I was giving examples before of what might be happening with pitta, fire expression through various places. So what are the qualities of pitta? So pitta is hot and sharp, so it tends to have a sharpness to it. It's also subtle, so it's a little more light and mobile as well. We can think of the way in which the fire laps, and it can be quite mobile, right? It can, once it starts to burn, it can start to move as well. And it also has a certain foul smell to it. So there's an acidity also to the fire quality. So what can we do then to balance out? What are some of the opposite qualities? So we especially want to think with pitta, what can we do to cool and to calm? So what can we do to soften, cool, calm, relax? All of those qualities are really helpful with pitta. So whenever you're giving the medicine of food or lifestyle or in through the five senses, you really want to think about using those qualities in through all of those things. So food, what can we do that's more cooling and calming? So for example, many people, when I say this in more Western or temperate climates, will say cucumber. It's like we've all been taught somehow that cucumber is cooling or mint is cooling. So those are simple ones, and it's true. You can put cucumber in your water, it's cooling. There's a beautiful combination in Ayurveda, which is called CCF, cumin, coriander, and fennel. And using the seeds, combining them, and then boiling them as a tea, or also putting them into water to infuse, like leaving them overnight in water, is a very powerful way, if you drink this water, to bring a cooling into the internal. So for individuals who deal with loose stools, or if you're having acid reflux or burning in through the tummy, this is a wonderful way to decrease acid and also to really bring a cooling into the digestive and eliminatory tract and the whole body, actually. So what other things can we do in through diet to cool? Well, actually having leafy greens, for example, is a great way to cool. So having more of our greens. Having, for example, coconut yogurt. Coconut in general is cooling. Yogurt can be quite cooling as well. Dairy in general, even cow dairy, is more cooling. Although because I really share from a place of nonviolence in our contemporary context, from a place of ahimsa, I really share, and we do so through Rasa Ayurveda as well. We share Ayurveda really in a vegan context, in a plant-based context. So coconut milk or coconut yogurt is also a wonderful way, and even that placed on the body. So sometimes when I'm noticing redness or inflammation that will enter into the skin, I'll use a coconut yogurt with one of our uptans to make a mask actually for the skin. So some of those things, also sweeter vegetables. So example, gourds, pumpkins, those are wonderful because the sweetness is also helpful in comparison to the sharpness and the heat that can come through pitta. So all of those can be calming, cooling, soothing. We want to think of soothing things. So even if you think of like a dessert, like a coconut milk rice pudding, this is wonderful for vata, for pitta. It can be good for vata as well, but you would put a little bit of warm spicing for vata. But for pitta, that, or using fennel and licorice in it as well, again, very cooling. So the diet can also, just as we discussed with vata, it can be cooling in its qualities, but it can also be cooling in how we eat. And what I mean by that, when I said with vata, that we eat good sized portion meals, pitta can have a very strong appetite. So what we want to do is not be hurried with eating. So pitta individuals actually usually eat very quickly, and then they hop from eating to doing something else. They're often in doership. So rather than doing that, taking our time, slowing down. So those are some things from diet. What about lifestyle with pitta? What's more calming, cooling, relaxing, soothing, right? Less sharp. Well, you can think of various things. Maybe it's the way in which you engage in hobbies. If you're constantly on the go and doing and busied, maybe taking times of space and relaxation. Generally for pitta, it can be wonderful to take times to just relax. Take times to lie down, lie in shavasana, enjoy some restorative yoga, enjoy some times of simply being with other beings, not always on point or trying to get something done or moving towards a final end goal. Also, just generally in our relational spaces with intimate partners or others, bringing a little less intensity. So pitta can be quite intense. So bringing a softness, a joy, and enjoyment, doing things that bring more joy and lightness also can be wonderful for pitta. And of course, things that involve the water element, maybe swimming, generally connecting with water, sitting beside the water, wonderful for calming and cooling out pitta. And that includes then the last of the three medicines. So when we think of pitta through the five senses, if we do 5 sense therapy, gazing upon water, washing the eyes with water, cool water, wonderful for pitta. Also making sure that we're not watching, listening, being touched by things that are fiery. So if we're constantly watching news that's intense, if we're listening to things that are intense, or we're listening to music that's really intense, what will it do to that pitta within us? If we're reading things that are really intense, right? So people who like to watch or listen to things about crime stories or negative news or any of those things, that can cause a lot of pitta, right? A lot of fire in the system. And similarly on the skin, if we're exposed to too much sun, so doing other things that are more cooling on the skin, that's why actually aloe vera gel, which we might use after we burn the skin, is directly cooling, calming, soothing for pitta. But for example, bathing the skin or putting on the skin something like coconut milk, as I was saying before, is a wonderful way that we can cool out the skin, or coconut oil is also a wonderful way. So it's giving you some ideas of the medicine. And then the last one, kapha dosha, to complete for this morning. Kapha is the elements of earth and of water. So it's the qualities of stability, of softness, of groundedness. There's a slow steadiness of kapha and a coolness also that happens with kapha. So we want to give some of those opposite qualities. So what would we do then through diet? If there's a coolness, we want to bring some warmth. Some spicing can actually uplift and bring some warmth. If kapha tends to get heavy, we want to eat lighter. So lighter portions, smaller portions, but also eating things that are a bit lighter. In contrast to vata, we don't want to have heavied meals, right? So really heavy or dense things or sort of comfort foods. Rather, we want to have sort of the opposite. So things that are lighter, more of maybe a soup or something that's not, fully grain or carbohydrate based, for example. If someone also is having like juices, can be very nice for kapha, but with warmth in them. So we don't just want them to be liquid, because kapha already has so much water within it. We would want them to also, or of course juices are liquid, but what I mean to say to that is we don't want them to be cool liquids. So we want to also put some ginger or some cayenne, some turmeric in that would spice that up. Eating smaller portions, as I said before, but also not snacking in between. So how much we eat, even intermittent fasting, which is becoming such a catch phrase, was always suggested in Ayurveda, but really for the last meal of the day. So we eat breakfast and lunch, which are the important meals especially, but we eat a very light meal at the end of the day. So with kapha, it might be the quality of the foods that we're eating is not really heavy and dense and creamy and rich. Rather, it's the opposite. There's a lightness. But also that we're not eating tons and snacking throughout the day and not having a heavy meal at the end of the day. So we go to bed heavied, because that will create even more groundedness. Like, it's well known that sumo wrestlers, that's what they do. They eat and then they sleep. So they eat, then they have a nap. They eat, then they go to bed. And it's a great way to gain weight. But actually for kapha dosha, one of the best medicines around ahara, chikitsa, around food as medicine, is not to eat in the evenings. So really not to eat sort of after 5, 6 p.m., have no further meal and have something very light, like a soup or just a lighter meal in the evening. And then as far as Vihara Chikitsa, lifestyle medicine for kapha, doing things that are uplifting. So if kapha is really grounded and stable and soft, which are all wonderful qualities, we want to bring the opposite. Start to bring things that are stimulating, energizing, activating, actually. So hobbies or pastimes or sports or things that are going to get someone activated. Sometimes a kapha individual can be a little bit more shy or a little bit more introverted. So joining things also that get us a little bit more extroverted, a little more connected, doing activities that maybe are out of our comfort zone, right? Kapha loves to be stable in their comfort, not to try anything new, sometimes to be very regimented with what they've always done and what they like to do. So trying something new, shifting it up, doing things that really are uplifting, maybe a little bit more mobile, things that might, kapha individuals will often say, I can't run or do things like that. Well, then maybe you do something like working out on an elliptical. It can start to get you moving, a little bit more dynamism that's happening, or dance, or something that's a little bit more expressive and getting you out of your comfort zone. Also in our lifestyle, connecting to things that are, again, lighter. So for example, kapha individuals may enjoy really, cooking, gardening, being on the earth, but maybe engaging in other things that are inspiring, like new thoughts, or connecting with like things we're doing now, learning and inspiration, things that will take them out of their consistency of perspective. Actually, I would say that oftentimes kapha individuals are the least constitution that I have as clients, as patients, and also as students, because so often they really, from an early age, I don't want to say get stuck, but get stabilized in what they're doing throughout their lives. So it can be hard to shift, hard to change. So in the lifestyle, starting to invite change, inviting transition, inviting some newness, inviting some freshness, trying something new. Kapha individuals will never like to leave or move from their house often. Like, they may go to work, but what I mean is not switching the environment that they live in. They love to stay in the same city or things like that. So changing things up, going for a bit of travel, being exposed to new things, reading things about other places of the world or other beings, other individuals, and how cultures move, and being inspired in general. And then through 5 sense therapy also, it's like what I've been talking about now, watching things that are inspiring and uplifting, listening to things that are uplifting. So actually maybe listening to music in contrast to vata, listening to things that are more dynamic. So dynamic music, active music, things that get you sort of activated and enlivened. I'm thinking of like some Latino, more like flamenco guitar and things like that have some fire to it. So there's a spiciness to it that can activate and wake up some of the groundedness of kapha. Then yes, absolutely, what we watch, maybe watching documentaries, or again, it brings freshness, newness, things that are inspiring though, of course, rather than just the same old, being in the same old kind of context or the same old perspectives. It can open up our perspectives, open up the mind to new and fresh things. What we're touched by also, in Ayurveda, we say for kapha, it's good to bring stimulation, because the skin can be so stable, and the skin can also hold a lot of oil for kapha. So something like dry brushing is wonderful, or using like triphala, which is a wonderful herbal combination of 3 herbs, to actually massage the skin and create stimulation, create invigoration, actually, for the skin. So various ways that through the 5 senses, what we smell, even using fragrances or rather essential oils or plants in our space that really are stimulating, enlivening, right? So clove or cinnamon, peppermint is as well, but of course it's cooling. So things that might uplift, that might stimulate us, that might bring a little bit more inspiration and upliftment. So I hope this helps to give you an idea. And as I was sharing all of this, I'm thinking about, that some of you might actually be taking notes, because this was quite an involved one. But the basic understanding is to understand that medicine, according to Ayurveda, is found in our diet, our lifestyle, and also through the five senses. So start to really consider, am I really connecting to a diet, a lifestyle, and through my five senses in ways that are medicinal for me, for my constitution, and for my life now? Or am I actually doing the opposite? Am I ingesting through these five senses? Am I also eating and having a lifestyle that actually keeps me stuck in some of the rolling imbalances that I am experiencing pain and suffering because of? So I hope that empowers each and every one of you. So someone's asking, what happens if you are presenting imbalances in more than one dosha? Absolutely. Then your therapy through ahara, vihara, and oshadi, so through diet, lifestyle, and the five senses, would sort of be a combination. You want to look at the qualities. Always look at the qualities. So for example, if it's a vata pitta issue and you're noticing that it's dry but also hot, then you want to think of what's moistening but also cooling. Right? So like I gave the example of aloe vera before. Wonderful. Then you might start drinking aloe vera, but also putting aloe vera on the body. If the situation gets too complicated, then connect with me directly, honestly speaking. So I'm trying to give you empowerment through these sessions together, also through our online courses, like the 50-hour online Ayurvedic course. Really trying to give you, and the women's course that we have right now, trying to give you empowerment also through the education on Rasa Ayurveda, so that you can really take these things into your own lives. But that's why we have Ayurvedic doctors and Ayurvedic practitioners like myself. So if you need to see someone and have some guidance as far as these protocols, then that's always an option. Okay, so I see people virtually, so you can always reach out and contact us in that way. I really hope that this has been of help today, a little bit of a longer session. We'll have just a 2-minute break, and then we'll come back for meditation. So much love to each and every one of you. Blessings. Namaste to all of you. And really hoping that the gift of Ayurveda showers blessings into each of our lives. Okay, see you in just a couple moments. Bye, everyone.